Hey, it's Mick Coyle here. Just wanted to update you on the Lost Souls project because it's been such a busy time and so much has happened. I just wanted to bring you up to date with where we're up to. I set out on this journey from this very spot actually 6 months ago to uncover a desperately uncomfortable truth: that the historic graves of our most vulnerable were being abandoned, forgotten, or even sold. It's a journey that's seen me travel up and down the country to see the neglect that we've imposed on mental health patients, and it's in the birth of a movement to create a lasting legacy for them. The lost souls found at last. Now, this isn't just a project about history, it's one which echoes what we still see today: mental health being sidelined, not spoken about, wrapped in stigma. Campaigner Mike McCarthy knows exactly what that's like. Tragically, losing his son to suicide opened his eyes to the perceived shame that still surrounds mental ill health. But Mike says what Lost Souls has uncovered has had a profound impact on him.
My first reaction is I am shocked. I think this is a national scandal. It's just such a crying shame that actually, in some ways, I'm kind of not surprised, because having been drawn into this world of suicide prevention, I've lost count of the people that I've spoken to who say that they've been treated following the suicide almost like collateral damage. And I think it's a reflection on how we treat mental health generally. Sure, everybody's talking about it these days. Everybody's talking about mental health, and we are making advances. There's no two ways about it. But I think in a more enlightened time to come, we'll look back and we'll think, however could we have done this? And if we could imagine for just 1 second all of those people just coming back for a minute, what would they say to us? What would they try to tell us? And I think, if that were possible, I think we'd then surely wake up to the damage that we've done and we continue to do, tragically.
Mike there, whose Baton of Hope campaign travelled the country this year, just as I did, trying to bring these sorts of conversations out into the open. Now, someone else whose input into the national conversation on mental health cannot be underestimated is Clark Carlisle, a former footballer who went public with his mental health issues. He told us after hearing our Lost Souls documentary, he hoped it could be a wake-up call for the country.
My first reaction after listening to the Lost Souls documentary was one of real sadness. True sadness for the families who will not have a clue where their loved ones are buried. And also, I felt some kind of shock, which surprises me, because I've studied the history of mental health and how it was dealt with in this country through the madhouses and the asylums. And at no point did it cross my mind to think about where those who died in those institutions, what happened to them. So, my eyes were truly open. That there was a depth and a humanity that was brought to my understanding of the history of mental health in this country by this documentary.
Now, of course, the documentary wasn't just about awareness, it was also about action. And after the idea of a national memorial was mentioned, a petition was launched calling for just that: a monument for our lost souls, a place of respect, of focus and of education which would honour forever these forgotten people. A legacy, if you like, a line in the sand on neglect, and something people like Clark are more than keen to support.
I would wholeheartedly, with all my energy and focus, back a call for a national memorial, that gives some kind of focal point for the families and loved ones of the vast amount of people who have been buried in these sites. It would be impossible to unearth each individual story, but to be able to have that place, almost a mecca of sorts for these lost ones, where people and families could take their pilgrimage to pay homage to and remember and pray for and think for those people who have been lost to this incredibly brutal system.
Now, at this point, I want to thank everyone who's emailed me about their stories of tracking down loved ones in these graves or have signed the petition. I've been contacted by families as far afield as Australia who've been horrified that their distant relatives have suffered this fate. A special mention too to those brilliant community organisations who saw this as an opportunity to galvanise public support for cemetery cleanups and awareness days. And it's here that Lost Souls momentum rolled into the world of politics. Not just in our communities, now word of our investigation had reached the corridors of power.
Well, firstly, thank you for sort of bringing this to my awareness. I'm sure that this is going to surprise a lot of people, that there's around 250,000 former mental health patients in graves around the UK that are not looked after, sometimes been sold off. It does show you that this is it's a national shame, really, isn't it? How we've treated people with mental illness throughout history. People should be buried with the dignity and the recognition that they deserve. And I think this really shows that mental health patients have been treated terribly when they're alive, and then there's still shame and a lack of dignity when they're dead. And that's very sad.
Now, Danny Chambers is the Lib Dem spokesperson for mental health. He went on to tell me that a Lost Souls memorial would be a fitting tribute to those whose stories we've uncovered.
Yeah, I think a national memorial is a really nice idea, because although we won't know the names of all these people, and for some of them we'll never be able to find that now, we still do this in the military. We have, and rightly so, a memorial to an unknown soldier to represent all those who fell serving our country, and we don't quite have their records or their details, but we still respect their sacrifice and want to remember them specifically. And I think that a national memorial could do that for these pauper lunatics.
And so Westminster is listening, while in Scotland, warm words from the SNP Health Secretary Neil Gray, who spoke to the Lost Souls Project in a renovated gravesite outside Glasgow.
I understand the importance of people being able to have somewhere to go to be able to think of, pay tribute to, recognise and pay respect to loved ones. And even where we haven't been able to recognise where people are buried, and there is a continuation of having unmarked graves, then I think that is an idea worth consideration around where we can give families the opportunity to pay respects to their ancestors.
Staying in Scotland, even more progress. A motion put before the Scottish Parliament, signed by cross-party MPs, asking for our Lost Souls findings to be recognised and a national memorial created to represent it. It was tabled by Alex Cole-Hamilton.
The Lost Souls investigation has uncovered the much bigger journey that we've been on as a society. In bygone eras, people were locked away. They died in exclusion and isolation, and then were unceremoniously interred in the ground without marker. I like to think we've come a great distance, but it's a reminder that we're still on that journey.
Now, one of the most heartbreaking cases Lost Souls uncovered is the fate of Horton Cemetery in Surrey. 9,000 bodies lie there, but on land that was sold off in the 1980s. No entry, no respect, and no dignity. But for local MP Helen Maguire, it was now time to act, tabling a motion before the UK Parliament asking for the House to recognise its plight, to recognise the lost souls, and to create a legacy for all those whose stories we've been sharing with you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think it's all too easy just to forget history and just to brush it under the carpet. And that's why it's really important that, Lost Souls is really raising the profile of this. This is part of our history. So what I've done is I've tabled what's called an early date motion, and I've asked a number of MPs to sign that. And that's to recognise that there are sites, burial sites like this up and down the country that need to be recognised, and also calling for a national monument so that individuals who have lost their lives and are buried without the respect are recognised.
So it's been a very busy 6 months since we first told you the stories of these forgotten figures. But in that time, the impact of those stories has been felt across the country. A new movement in mental health campaigning and a vision to see a national memorial to remember the lost souls forever. I'll keep you posted on where we go next.